parable of Jesus about the prodigal son. I like prodigal better, it's easier on the flow. So this is the story about a child, in the case of it was a son, that asked for his inheritance from his father and then go into the world to explore himself and to use his inheritance. And in that process, squandering it all, ending up eating with the pigs and eventually getting himself to a point where he could make the decision to return home, and was received with a great feast. So that's the broad story. What is the implications, the practical living of it, the reality of it, from a perspective of how does it really actually work and what really happens? So the prodigal son would be like the children asking the father permission to take their inheritance, to go into the world and use their free choice. Through their free choice, they would be exploring self-interest, and through exploring self-interest, the resources would be used to the point where there is nothing left of the inheritance. That would then force the person that has squandered his or her inheritance to eat with the pigs. That means live in a mess, in a world that's completely messed up. And they will live with the pigs out of guilt and refuse to see that it is really guilt, because they knew the consequence of squandering the inheritance. And they'll use pride and arrogance and justification and intellectualization and knowledge and all kinds of ways, and consciousness, all kinds of ways to hide the awful truth. The truth being that the inheritance was squandered and that they can't return home because of this guilt. Now here comes in an interesting word that has been thrown around through religions over time, which is the word repentance. Now, repentance has become quite an ugly word, because you have to submit yourself without any clear taking responsibility to a condition where you become at full mercy of God, which is not implied in the story of the prodigal son. In the story of the prodigal son, you have clear evidence that while eating with the pigs, the son realized something about themselves, and the son realized that if they would go home, they would be forgiven. But the son also realized another point, the point of self-forgiveness, realizing that unless he clearly understands how he has caused himself to squander his inheritance, and can clearly show the lesson effectively, that he will not repeat the same mistakes again and abuse again and again, place self-interest ahead of what is the best in terms of the home, the fatherly construct, the origin of himself, the source from which he got this inheritance, unless he understands completely to the level and degree that he will not repeat the same mistake, which is self-forgiveness and self-honesty, he will not be forgiven. Because if he returned home, you can look at it yourself, if you're a parent, you'll see if your child returned home and is arrogant, non-repentant, no forgiveness, no understanding, and claiming that they acted in free choice and that was their right, and therefore they didn't do anything wrong, they don't need self-forgiveness, then they would not be forgiven. So there is a part in the process of our existence that involves self-forgiveness, and there's a part where another person accepts your self-forgiveness, which is the forgiveness. And within that process, it is critical that we understand that unless we do the technology of our self-correction correctly, we cannot perfect ourselves. So the process of self-perfection is embedded in the prodigal son story, where one can take your existence of squandering your inheritance, because everyone in essence are coming from one source. Your parents are your origin in your current form, but who you are in total, that means the total inheritance you have within the ability to walk the earth and live here with many other beings, is something that was given to you. You have no right to it from the perspective that it was something you created yourself. It is given to you. It is your inheritance. What have you done with your inheritance? You have based your inheritance on a very curious concept. That of separation, that of free choice. Free choice is separation. Where you have not lived and existed in a way that is best for all that is here, but only in a way that is best for yourself. Within that context, we have created a world that is in a total mess. 3.3 billion people jobless in 2011, millions starving, many animals going extinct, forests destroyed, everything, a total inheritance. It's as if we can't get enough, as if it's a disease. We can't stop till we've destroyed it all, and we are having to live with the pigs in this mess. In a way, we're already living with the pigs. If we really want to take it to the point where it will be a physical reality where we have to eat with the pigs, then that is where we will go. But inevitably, at any single moment, the possibility exists that you may realize what you're doing. That is called awareness. The problem is that one tends to create an idea and an ideal about what it is you want to do with your inheritance and how you want to live. That idea and ideal is then based in forms of feelings. Those feelings that you bubble up, you call consciousness, because that is something you can manipulate to suit your own self-interest. Awareness is something that you cannot manipulate. It is something that is what it is, everywhere it is, it's always the same. It is based on the actuality of all parts that is in that moment, and therefore one cannot be blind to the mess that you are creating if you are in awareness. If you are in consciousness, obviously the only thing that exists is your own self-created, self-interest, inheritance, your own Hollywood movie, so to speak. If one dare to consider self-honestly the fact that if you return home right now and you have not realized what you have done, you cannot be forgiven. Because if you were forgiven, you would in fact not learn anything. You will not be the image and likeness of your Creator. And that would be in its very essence an atrocity by your Creator, which is in a way impossible. Therefore, the world as it exists in the way it exists, where we can clearly at this stage see no future, no potential of change at all, indicate that we will have to walk a road that's going to get much worse, as we have indicated in this end times. The whole point of self-forgiveness, the whole point of the prodigal son is now in play. You will be driven to that status unless you can find it within yourself to become self-aware, to self-realize yourself, to take responsibility through self-forgiveness, to be self-honest with you, to make sure you have in fact taken self-responsibility for every part that you have accepted and allowed, and that you then purify yourself through self-forgiveness and perfect yourself to be able to be the equal of your origin, your father, the point from where you got your inheritance, so that you can return home with dignity and be forgiven and be the proof that you will not again make the same mistake, to separate yourself from each other, that you'll love your neighbor as yourself, that you will give to others what you would like to receive, so that inheritance become the inherent value of life, where you are no longer walking a parable where you are able to rape yourself and everyone else. Because look at the word parable. If you move it around a little bit, it says rape Abel. Now the parable of Jesus was simply a story to help you to unrape yourself, to stop the abuse. But if you look at the world now, what happens in the mind, in thoughts, has become the greatest atrocities ever imagined, where there is apparently this freedom, this free choice, this free will, where you can have any thought, no matter what, and it is okay because it's private. We even create the laws of our relationships physically to divide the spoils of this inheritance amongst us, where most get no spoils, while the other gets spoiled rotten. In essence, creating a rotten society. We all know this. There is no one in this world that can claim that they are not aware of the situation on earth. But there are many, most, that will use consciousness, light and love, and all kinds of beautiful pictures and colors to hide behind, to not take responsibility, and to claim that they want to make the most of it. You are still there in the story of the prodigal son, where you are squandering your inheritance, where you are harming. Your future is predictable. You will eat with the pigs. And you will have to look at your arrogance and your pride, and you will be taken to self-forgiveness. And unless you have purified yourself with self-forgiveness, you will not be allowed home. You have no rights, because you took responsibility for your own inheritance, and therefore you gave up your rights to life. You gave up your rights to home. You gave up so that you could live in self-interest, so that you could have the freedom of choice, because apparently you were so good that you will always just make the best choice for all. It is proven it isn't so, that you had no idea what free choice really means. The consequence, the karma, the outcome of squandering your inheritance, pretending that within that your God is eating with the pigs. Will your arrogance and pride and guilt be self-forgiven? Will you be able to find it within you to be humble enough to purify yourself and become part of the one, the home, the place where all inheritance come from? Unfortunately for you, you have taken the responsibility upon yourself that you are the only one that have the authority to decide what you will do with your life. You have no authority in greater things, only your life. You can only be back equal and one if you are found worthy, if you are measured and found wanting. Wanting being your way instead of the way that is best for all, you will be cast out. We watch this daily through the portal. If psychics were true or mediums were true, they would be able to explain this to you daily, as many die daily facing the consequence of their life. And they would be able to explain to you the context of the prodigal son, as I've just explained it to you. But they are unable because they are acting in self-interest. They are not willing to actually place the truth in front of their fellow man, because they'll be scoffed and possibly crucified in a way. And they're scared of that. I mean, wasn't that the greatest example? Jesus being crucified because he's willing to take on the way mankind existed. The examples is there. To hide behind excuses like love and light and repentance without understanding what it in fact entails practically is useless. The absolute truth is that which is best for all. That is from whence everyone got their inheritance. The fact that you have competed to improve yourself to the detriment of your fellow man is despicable. And there is no way you will ever get away from the consequence. How do we know that? You will die. There is no one that escapes that. And what you will find is consequence. In absolute measures of exactness. Every single thought counted. Every single movement, every single deed, every single allowance, everything measured. It's in your holy books as well. But you don't read, do you? You're more interested in your squandering of your inheritance. Your journey of the prodigal son is being hastened. It will be upon each one sooner than you could ever expect. expect, suddenly without warning, and no one will be able to help you. You will be eating with the pigs and will be rejected by everyone because you are no longer part of their game of squandering. At Destiny, we will shortly launch a free support and training course for 6 months, which is individually supported with a buddy which takes on this journey of the prodigal son to assist you to find it within yourself, to establish clear self-awareness, clear self-responsibility, to account of yourself in every way through self-forgiveness and self-honesty, and to take a stand for what is best for all, so that home can be returned to earth, so that you can be ready to die at any breath. In the meantime, to be ready when the course starts, join the forums and start doing some investigations. Why it is that Destiny is being crucified by so many. It should interest you. Or if you are one of those that crucifies, the only suggestion is that you look at the story of the prodigal son. And remember that when you arrive at the pigs, and you make the pigs your dicks, remember self-forgiveness.